Hello and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm your host, Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News, and it's our weekly roundup of the stories that we're talking about here in northern Michigan. And this week I'm joined by Sara Simnitch from 9 and 10 News. Sara, welcome back.
Thank you, Bill.
Good to see you. Let's kind of go back a week. Last week we had a snow day on our normally scheduled time. We called it off because of impending doom.
Yeah.
And, we're in for another round of winter weather, it looks like.
Yeah.
Are you getting sick of it yet?
I kind of am, I have to say. I love winter. I would actually prefer winter over summer. But it seemed just like real dreary. You know, we had some sunshine yesterday, but I'm okay with winter as long as we see the sun. You know, I think it's easy to slip into some cabin fever when it's cloudy outside.
You know, I was looking at the National Weather Service webpage yesterday, and what I was surprised by, we're still 30 inches below average for this time of year. So, you know, with as many snow days as most school districts have already had, we're still 3 feet below normal.
Yeah, well, I actually was talking to my photojournalist, and he was telling me, well, I'll be here 2 years in May. And he had told me last year, or 2011 when I started in the spring, you know, are you ready for winter? Do you have, you know, thick socks, good boots, you know? And I thought, oh, it's not going to be that bad, you know? And he said, you just wait. If you've never had a northern Michigan winter, because I'm from downstate, but it's always obviously more up here. And he said, you know, just wait until we get our snow. And it was nothing. You know, last year was just this big letdown, and he was like, well, that's horrible. He said, you know, this is not a good measure of winter snow. And so then this year, it seems, he said, this is more like what we usually get, you know. So, but it's a lot. It seems like we've already had quite a bit.
We still have a ways to go.
A couple more months at least.
First week of February. But let's talk about a story last week that we both covered, a fire out in Traverse City, which in and of itself is actually pretty unusual because it doesn't seem like we really have a lot of fires in town. This was a business fire.
Yeah, we actually had heard about it just before. We heard about it at the most inconvenient time ever for news, basically.
4 o'clock in the afternoon.
4 o'clock in the afternoon. And my story for the day was being edited, and so I went out just to get what I thought was just some video. And then we were going to take our nightside reporter and bring her to the scene later. And what it turned out to be was my photojournalist coming up with the live truck, me going live, not expecting to do that. Everything as far as, you know, the glamorous TV life goes, all of my makeup was not with me. It was like completely unexpected, but at the same time, that's what makes it fun about our job, is that it's spontaneous. You never know what's going to happen. And so really it's just trying to get some information, you know, right away.
In a short amount of time. Let me take you back, and we'll, you know, kind of tell everybody what goes on behind the scenes. At 4 o'clock, what's going on in the Traverse City office there at the 9 and 10 Bureau? You're pretty much done with your story from your standpoint for the day, but it's far from being done.
It's far from being done. Basically what happens is when we get our interviews for the day, any given story, we could have 2 interviews, we could have 5, depending on, you know, what our day's like. We typically have our deadline, well, there isn't typically a deadline, but we make our deadline as we go every day, and usually that's around 3:30. We try to not get back to the Bureau any later than 3:30. But oftentimes that's hard. If we're covering something out in Benzie County or Antrim or Petoskey even, you know, that's harder. And then the roads on top of that, you have to plan for that. So we get back, and I log my interview, which is pretty much me typing out the time code and of the camera and the sound bites from the people I interviewed throughout the day, so that when I go to write my story, I can just pull those in. And once I'm done writing them, Jeremy starts editing, and I'll voice it over. Right. And so he was in the editing process, and, you know, we're thinking that our day is about to wrap up, except after that you have to put things on the internet. You have to write things for the later shows. We have a 7, 10, and 11 also, so we also have to write for that. So
there's a ways to go.
There is a ways to go. So we went out there, and it turns out this fire was at Arrow Roofing off of 8th Street, and it's still unclear what started it. Chief Teller said that they're just calling it undetermined right now, but it was pretty bad. I mean, sometimes you go to a fire not knowing what to expect, but this one was engulfed.
Well, it wasn't an empty building or an empty warehouse. I mean, we've got roofing shingles and tar and plenty of flammable materials to keep that fire going.
And the crews had just left, you know, half hour before for the day.
The employees.
Yeah, employees. And so The roof just kept reigniting. There were several crews there on scene. There was a lot of smoke. You could see it for miles. There were people driving by staring, traffic was backing up. It was a big mess. And so we ended up going live at the top of the 6 o'clock and then the bottom of the 6, so around 6:30. And then Vanessa, our nightside reporter, took over from there. But it's still undetermined. And right now they're going to be working out of a trailer. They're renting an office to put on site. And they said it's not going to slow them down any. So. You know what?
One thing I find interesting just about the backstory to your day, and when I was doing television too back in the day, when you go out and do an interview, a lot of times people would ask me, when is this going to be on? Mm-hmm. And 9 times out of 10, you say, today.
Yeah. And they don't know.
And it's how are you going to get that done? Mm-hmm. And it just happened.
It does. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes the answer is, I don't know how I'm going to get that done.
It could be next week. But the thing about that, too, is, like you said, if you're in Benzie County or if you're in Leelanau, I know 9 and 10 has a lot of reporters all over the place, but in the event you would have to go to Antrim County or Kalkaska, or sometimes you even go down to Cadillac, frankly. It doesn't matter how far you have to drive or how much time you spend in the car. Your deadline doesn't change.
Right. Well, the thing is, too, is Jeremy and I, my photojournalists, we feel blessed up here because we do have 5 counties to cover, Benzie, Leelanau, Antrim, Kalkaska, and Grand Traverse. But the thing is primarily our stories are either here or in, maybe Benzie, Leelanau, but it's rare that we get out to Antrim. Right. It's not a choice. It just depends on what's happening in what areas. But the farthest we usually have to go for a story is about an hour. You have reporters in Cadillac. We've got our reporters covering Clare, Lake County, Mecosta, Newaygo. All of those counties are a farther drive. And then you have Christina in Petoskey who is driving to the Sioux or Kinross for a story, or wherever she may go, depending on, she could have a 3-hour drive one way and there and back. And so for her to get back to the bureau around 4:30 is a good day. If I do that, I'm panicking. So every reporter has a different strategy. You just have a routine. When you get back, you just work at your own pace. Although you try and be, you're rushed. So that's definitely an adventure every day.
I remember the first time I had to drive to Bel Air from Traverse City for a story. Looked at the map, I called whoever I was interviewing. I'll probably be there about 45 minutes. Yeah. Well, it took me about an hour and 20 to get to Bel Air, just navigating the roads, finding my way for the first time. Then it takes another hour and an hour and a half to get back. And so you have to realize that, like I said, your deadline doesn't change. You still need to get stuff on. My favorite story was I drove up to, from Traverse City, I had to drive up to the UP, cross the bridge, and I did a story in Sault Ste. Marie. And I started driving back. Before I even left, they told me, this is going to be on at 5. So it was just a chaotic thought to me to go drive to the Sioux, do a story, come back, and it be on at 5. So basically, I did a look live in front of this school where I talked for a minute and a half. Yeah. And then I covered a lot of it with video, and I threw in a soundbite or two, so I had very minimal editing to do. Yeah. But you've just got to do whatever you've got to do to get it done.
And sometimes, my news director or whoever will ask me, can you do this? Is this logical? Can you, and I remember, for the live shot for the fire, it usually, to set up our live truck, it takes a good half hour. Well, Jeremy got that up in about 20 minutes because he knew that's all we had. And what we did is we had just beamed them the raw video that I shot, and then they edited it in Cadillac. So that wouldn't be our ideal situation, but we got video on the air. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. But yeah, every day, like you were saying, setting up interviews is another thing. I don't have my watch on today, but every day it's watching my watch. Okay, we'll be there at 1:30. Jeremy and I, what time did you tell him we'll be there? If we have to, back it up a little bit. But that's what I pride myself on, is I'm really good at scheduling interviews. I know how long it will take at one particular place. If it does take longer, we can, usually the other person is flexible. But a lot of scheduling and a lot of clock watching on our job. Yeah. So.
Well, let's kind of shift gears, talk about some of the other stories that we've been covering over the past week. And it really has been a busy week in Traverse City. It seemed like, I think it was Friday when it hit the fan in terms of just so much going on. We had an update on the Marina lawsuit. We've had an update on the Jensen Schwander murder case from over a year and a half ago, the murder of Carly Lewis. Just tell me what, I mean, of all the things you shuffle, what kind of crosses your desk, and what are you tasked with calling on for the shows that the folks in Cadillac need to work on too?
Sure. Basically, and this goes for everyone at 9 and 10, you know, anytime we cover a robbery or something like that and the person's arrested, or a murder or whatever it may be, we follow that person all the way through court. So that means arraignments, pretrials, preliminary exams, jury conference, final conference, sentencing. We follow them all the way through court. And oftentimes that's hard to keep up with. We do have a digital assignment folder, so that way I can type it in there on February 20th, this person will be in court, you know, and then I call the courts. So basically, we have a lot of those right now. There's about 8 or 10 of those people we're following through the courts. And then you have to worry about rescheduling, you know, things like that. But when something like this comes across, we definitely call on it. As far as the Robert Jensen Schwander case goes, basically what had happened with that is, you had known this when we covered it, that they were going to file an appeal. That was always the plan.
To the sentence.
Yes, to the sentence, because the judge had sentenced him to 40 to 70 years, which is 2 times the highest minimum sentence, and he was, you know, convicted. Jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. So what happened is the Court of Appeals now is asking Judge Power here in Grand Traverse County, you know, basically why? Why did you sentence him? Why did you give him such a high sentence? They're saying that it's not justified enough. They agree that he should have a higher sentence than the given guidelines, but they believe that that is a little excessive. Judge Power did, the day of, say, I feel like this sentence is too light. I feel like this was cruel.
The minimum sentence is too light.
Right, and that I feel like the murder was cruel, and I feel like you betrayed her family, and all of those were given reasons. Well, they're saying now that, you know, they want him to
That's not enough
to
of a
clarify,
reason.
right?
Yeah.
Whether when I talked to the assistant prosecutor, Noel said that it's dependent. They don't know right now. Are they going to have him write an explanation? Are they going to have Robert Schwander back in court in person for Judge Power to deliver another explanation? So they're not clear, and they don't even know if he will be resentenced right now. They're kind of just in the limbo phase.
Yeah, and I talked to Schwander's attorney, Craig Elhart, too, and he told me, you know, it's conceivable that the judge could just, you know, hold this resentencing hearing and explain his sentence and be done with it.
And that's it.
But it's also conceivable that the judge could say, okay, I will reevaluate this and maybe there will be a lesser sentence.
Right.
So there's still some question mark. You know, it's one of those things where a year ago we thought it's over, barring the appeal.
It's never over. It's back.
But it's not over. It's not over.
It is.
You know, the other thing that's not over, the Marina lawsuit in Traverse City, a pretty significant step last week too for the judge here locally to decide to take the city of Traverse City off of that lawsuit. So give me your perspective. That's another story we're all kind of following, at least peripherally, as it works through. It's really one of those stories that's hard to do an update on every single time something happens.
Because it's such a lengthy process.
Because every time you write a story about it, it's 45 seconds
longer and longer
explaining where, you know, what led us to this point. But the lawsuit still exists. It hasn't gone away.
Right. I think the fact that the part of this certain part that was dropped, I think it sort of surprised me a little bit. I don't know, you probably have more insight on it than I do. But I think that this lawsuit I think something will end up panning out. I think they're going to get something. 50 million was the original number. I don't know. But, you know, now it's kind of like, well, where does it go from here? It just got less powerful. You know. Yeah,
I think you're right in that sense of the perception, at least. The city is off of the lawsuit. The director of the Department of Public Works is off the lawsuit. It's basically now the marina, the dock master at the marina, who the
harbor master.
Yeah, the judge said could theoretically have known something was wrong, and the jury can decide. And then the long list of private contractors and electricians and people who worked on the electrical systems, those are the folks still on this lawsuit. So this one too.
That's another thing. Over. That's another thing that we were just talking about, Jeremy and I, was that what is a jury going to do? It's interesting to think about, really. Are they going to look at this and say, Michael Knudsen should not have been swimming here. You know better. It's a marina. This is not for swimming. There's boat traffic.
There's oil in the water.
There's oil in the water. There's
water.
things like that. You should have not been swimming here. Or are they going to look at it and say, there aren't signs posted? Because there weren't. I mean,
and there's been
way over
controversy about how close they were and whether or not they were adequately posted.
Right, and they were. I mean, there were some, stamped on the pavement, but not anywhere near, because we were there the day after it happened. So, there were some, but not anywhere near where the marina was. Is that, I don't know what the guidelines are. Is that consider a sign posted? Because it's not right where he died. Is that, do you know what I mean? So it really depends on what a jury does. Are they going to find the city at fault? Are they going to find him at fault? Is it, I don't know. And then you've got the faulty wiring. And then, like Feiger said when we first interviewed him, boaters could go into the water. Boaters go in and clean their boats. Is that an argument? I think there's a lot of different facets that the jury can look at as far as
and there's another big if it even gets to
trial.
If
it even gets there.
If it goes that far, or will there be mediation and discussion and some kind of out-of-court settlement too?
Absolutely.
Oh, another big one. Let's move to a national story, which you covered yesterday, and obviously it affects every small town all across northern Michigan, all across the country, but this change at the post office, which results in the elimination of Saturday delivery.
Right. Basically, right now, I think that the way that the Postmaster General had announced it, it sounded like, we're doing this. This is a done deal. But really, it's not a done deal yet. It's a proposed change. Congress needs to weigh in. Although they've said they found a way to do it without lawmakers, I think that Congress will still play a role in this. But basically, it will save them $2 billion about, a year to do this, to eliminate Saturday delivery. And a lot of people we talked to a few different viewpoints yesterday, one of them being the USPS in Lansing. We had a phone interview with Sabrina Todd, and she was telling us, we've had to call on Congress for assistance. We're in severe financial crisis. I think everyone knows that. But this is just one of the many proposed changes. What this would do is basically you would still get packages on Saturdays, and you would still get express mail and mail order medications. However, you would not get first class, you wouldn't get letters, you wouldn't get bills. Your post office will still be open. You can still, if you have a P.O. box, you'll still get mail. But it's basically the carriers that are going to be significantly decreased as far as them being out on the roads at all. They said they've seen a decrease in their first class mail, but they've seen an increase in their package business. So they're going to maintain that on Saturdays. The people we talked to, kind of man on the street yesterday, hung out at the post office, basically said they were a fan of it. They said, if they need to balance their budget, this is the way to do it. I don't have anything that needs to get out on Saturdays that can't wait till Monday or go out on Friday. But I think for a lot of people like myself, I work a 9 to 5, 9 to 6 job. I go to the post office on Saturdays. I go to the bank on Saturday mornings because I can't get there on weekdays. But if the post office is still open and I can drop something off, it's not a big deal if it doesn't get out on Saturdays.
Give me your thoughts or your take on whether this is one of those stories that's a non-story. Because a lot of times we come across those. It's a story that needs to be told for whatever reason. It's news, it's happening.
But is the impact that big?
Yeah, but is the impact that big? I guess, do people care? And is it a local news story? I mean, obviously, you did it as a local news story, and you talked to local folks about it. But it's a lot of times we encounter these types of things where it's like, we have to do this because it's there.
Right.
But how big of a deal is it?
Well, I think as far in terms of it's how you look at it. If you look at it as the normal me and you, would somebody come up to me on the street, a news reporter, and ask me if I care? Basically, I would say, I guess not, really. I really don't care. I mean, we saw this coming, but a lot of people do care. A lot of people, but as far as if you're looking at it from the side of a union, we interviewed Ron Crumry, who is with the local postal workers union.
Okay.
And his side of it, it's a big deal. It means jobs. It means a huge impact as far as their mail carriers. He said, we're still going to have some mail carriers on Saturdays, likely. Who's that going to be? Are we going to lose jobs? He said, we're already getting mail from Gaylord because they've been struggling. He said, is this going to affect our processing centers? He said, it's going to hurt the customer because you're going to have slower mail delivery now because we only have 5 days a week versus 6. He said, so this is all a chain effect. The union is concerned about it. But if you talk to somebody who's non-union or you talk to, a normal person on the street, maybe not. Another impact we looked at was businesses. I called Kilwins and Cherry Republic. They ship their goods all over the country. I asked Kilwins, if you can't get your fudge out on Saturdays, is it going to be a big deal? Do you use USPS? A lot of businesses use UPS, FedEx. I talked to some copy shops. They said, well, it doesn't really impact us because we're not open on Saturdays. Kilwins said, well, it's something that we'd have to plan for. A customer would have to know that it's going to be there Monday, not Saturday, and it may cost more. So I think it's a different impact every angle you look at.
You raised another interesting thought for me. How many calls did you make on that story yesterday?
A lot. And
how many of those calls resulted in actual, either actual interviews or actual interviews that made it onto the air?
About three, and we made about 12 calls or more. And basically it was, let's look at this. As a reporter, you look at it from all of those angles. Let's not look at this from, Bill's mailbox. We know Bill's going to be impacted because he's not going to get mail on Saturday. But what about Cherry Republic? What about these businesses who a large part of their business is sending out their goods, is online business, is wholesale orders, is birthday parties or weddings or, anything like that. Let's look at it from that aspect. But what we found is the impact there isn't very large. And we were really trying to find that impact, and that's why we made so many calls. But and I'm sure there are businesses. I'm sure there are major companies. I don't want to say that no business is impacted, but we didn't find any yesterday. If there's a manufacturing company or somebody that ships their goods on the weekends, that possibly could be a larger impact, and we just didn't speak with them. But you always want to get, somebody that's impacted for a story, anytime.
And it's not so much, because I think this goes to a criticism of the media in general, it's not so much that you're trying to make those calls until you find what you want to hear.
Right.
It's that you're trying to figure out who's affected by this story.
Absolutely. And I think that when we initially thought about doing, talking to the businesses about the impact of no Saturday, letter service or mail service, we even called banks. Do banks send out invoices on Saturdays? Could that be a problem? Do they send out credit card bills on Saturdays? So a lot of that, we thought about too, but it's really just about finding the impact about, let's see, we thought this was a good idea. Well, businesses will be impacted. Well, what we found is that they really weren't that much, So yeah, it is. It's really just about calling around and just seeing what you can find. And oftentimes it's the fact that they're not impacted is a story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't always have to be a negative thing. The fact that, this isn't going to bother me. I can still ship my fudge on Fridays. I'm fine with it, So it really just depends, and you don't know until you get out there and really work the story.
Well, and I think what you've explained is a really good example of how you have done and how local news can do something to, what we say, advance the story. The story doesn't just have to be that the post office is stopping, most delivery on Saturday, and this is the story, which isn't that thrilling and exciting. And I mean, you found a way to advance it, go to other places that would or would not be affected, and make it into something that people can maybe relate to more than just the whole, my mailbox is not going to have any mail in it.
And that's how we write it too, is in our scripts. How is this going to impact you? It was our feedback at 5 question where people got on our Facebook and weighed in on it. It's, okay, why do I care? That's what we know that the viewer is asking. Well, you care because if you're a union member, this is what it means for you. If you are a man on the street, this is what it means for you. If you have a business, this is what it means. And I think that's what people want to know, and that's why we localize stories and try and make them. How is it going to impact Northern Michigan? So.
Well, let's finish out this week on a fun story that Sara's been working on, and it involved you coming over to WTCM a couple of weeks ago. So I missed you by a few minutes.
Yeah.
Our paths did not connect, but we see each other enough as it is. But tell us about that story that you're working on. It's going to air next week, right?
Yeah, it's actually going to be a special feature. It's Life on the Radio. And what it is when Colleen was out of town, Jack O'Malley's co-host for the morning, Jack had some locals out in the community to fill in for her, and I was one of them. And so I was able to sit in with Jack and basically learn another media outlet, learn how to be on the radio. And I had no clue going in. And Jack asked me, have you ever been on the radio? No, I dabbled in it a little bit in college on our university station, but it was nothing that was significant. And so it was basically me for getting up really early, like 3 in the morning, which I typically don't get out till around 7, going in there and just sitting in with Jack for the morning, seeing how he runs the show. It's such a well-oiled machine that he really does a great job with it. And so I went in there and he chatted with me a little bit, got to know me a little bit. I was able to do the traffic report and just kind of weigh in and chat when I wanted to. And so basically what we're doing is throughout that time I had a photojournalist with me filming everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn that into a TV story. And basically 3 to 4 minutes of what it's like to be on the radio. Not so much just me being on the radio, but what it's like to be on the radio.
Right.
So
I don't want you to give things away, and I know you're still working on the writing process of it, but any highlights you can either tease us what you kind of think might be involved, or anything you've learned that just surprised you about life on the radio?
Yeah, I think that it is. I was nervous. I can tell you that. And there's one question where Corey asked, because Corey interviewed me and Jack afterwards, and it was odd for me to be on the other side of the camera. Yeah. And so Corey was asking me questions, and Jack had said something to him about being nervous, and Corey said, well, she was nervous. She admitted that, and it is, and I think it's different. You feel like you still connect with your listener, but it's not like you are connecting like you're on television. You almost feel like you're seeing them. And on the radio, it's just a different feeling,
Yeah, it is.
And I was surprised to see that you guys, when you do the news, are in a different room. Or Joel is anyway. Yep. And it sounds like when you're listening on the radio that they're right next to each other. And it's because they have great chemistry, but Joel's actually across the hall. And so we talked about that a little bit, about how I didn't know that, and just the timing of the show and everything. So it's definitely a little more freestyle than television.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Tell us what day that's going to air.
This will be on the 13th next week. So,
Perfect.
Yep. So we're excited to see it myself.
Good.
So
Well, we're excited. We were excited to have you in, and we'll look forward to the final product there as well. We're also excited to have you join us on the briefing room. We're out of time already this week. I want to thank Sara Simnitch from 9 and 10 News, and I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio, and our two worlds collide on the 13th. You'll have to tune in to 9 and 10 News for that story with Jack O'Malley and the morning show from WTCM. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again right here next week on the briefing room.